When did a romantic dinner turn into a breakup? So brutal you still replay it in your head? I can still hear the echo of the wine glass tumbling off the edge of the table. It landed on the hardwood floor with a deafening shatter that sent little red droplets splattering across the room. The shards sparkled under the soft, golden light I'd carefully arranged, hoping for a cozy atmosphere. Funny how you can plan everything down to the smallest detail. Candles flickering in perfect rhythm, dinner recipes tested in advance, and still watch it all fall apart in a matter of seconds. That night, I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. I remember gripping the back of a chair for support because my legs shook so badly. Across the table, Ethan stood with his jaw clenched, an expression on his face I'd never seen before. Raw anger, and beneath it, something even more alarming, heartbreak. In that moment, I was both furious and devastated. We had planned a romantic dinner to celebrate our 3rd anniversary. At least I had planned it. Ethan was supposed to help, but work got in the way like it always did. I told myself I didn't mind, that I'd handle the preparations alone, but a part of me was already resentful. By the time he showed up, dinner was lukewarm, and I was half a bottle of Chardonnay in. It was the worst possible scenario for a conversation we probably should have had months ago. I don't know exactly what I said first. It must have been something snide about him being late or never taking anything seriously. He fired back, claiming I was overreacting yet again. I think I laughed in disbelief, then asked if he even remembered what day it was. Of course he did, he said. He'd gotten me flowers. But they were nothing special, just a bouquet of wilting daisies he must have grabbed from a gas station on his way. When I saw them, my heart sank, and I couldn't hide my disappointment. That must have been the real trigger for everything that followed. The argument escalated with terrifying speed. I accused him of being half present in our relationship, of texting his friends instead of talking to me, of canceling plans to watch sports with his buddies. He insisted I was impossible to please, that every moment with me felt like walking on eggshells. My chest hurt, as though all the oxygen had suddenly been sucked out of the room. This wasn't how I'd imagined the night going. It was supposed to be a chance to reconnect, to reignite the spark we'd lost somewhere in the daily grind. But maybe we were so far gone that no romantic gesture could rescue us. The tension had been piling up for months, quietly at first, like dust settling in corners, then more noticeably. We'd been fighting over trivial things, or worse, ignoring the issues completely, pretending everything was fine because it hurt too much to admit we'd drifted apart. I flung a remark at him, something about him never being around. He retorted with a jab about my controlling nature. I tried to defend myself, but my voice cracked. I told him he was insensitive, that he didn't understand my dreams or ambitions. He countered by saying I'd never supported his. The unspoken wounds from months of resentment and misunderstandings poured out. That's when I reached for my glass of wine, took a swig, and in my frustration bumped the entire bottle off the table. It tumbled to the floor, spinning, then shattered, releasing a crimson puddle that seeped into the cracks of the wood. I froze, staring at the mess. It was like a metaphor for our relationship. Something beautiful we'd treasured had fallen and broken, and we had no idea how to fix it. Ethan's eyes glinted with tears, but he refused to cry in front of me. He turned his head away, hands balled into fists at his sides. In the pregnant silence that followed, my mind flashed back to the first time we met, a campus coffee shop, my junior year of college, his senior. I was there early in the morning preparing for an exam, and he walked in wearing a wrinkled t-shirt, hair unkempt, looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. He asked if he could share my table since the place was packed. We ended up chatting about something random, music tastes, if I recall correctly, and he made me laugh so hard I snorted latte foam. At that memory, my anger cracked for a moment. I wondered how we got from that sweet encounter to the chaos unraveling before, but the softness in me vanished as soon as Ethan started speaking again. I can't live like this, he said, voice trembling. I can't keep pretending we're on the same page when we're obviously not. He wasn't shouting. In fact, his voice was low and measured, which scared me more than any screaming could have. What do you mean? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. He pressed his lips together, looking anywhere but at me. You want me to propose, right? I blinked, taken aback that he'd say it so plainly. Of course I wanted him to propose. I'd hinted at it so many times in recent months. I'd imagined this anniversary dinner might be when he'd finally pop the question, or at least talk about the future. I'd watched too many rom-coms, planned too many Pinterest boards. Suddenly, I felt foolish. Yes, eventually, but not like this. Exactly, he cut me off. This is all you ever talk about. You think I don't see the saved wedding dress photos on your phone, or the way you linger over ring ads? You think I'm oblivious? I'm not. I'm just not ready. The honesty of his words was like a slap. My cheeks burned, both from embarrassment and from the sting of his accusation. I'd never wanted to pressure him. I just thought we were heading in the same direction. That was always the plan, right? Eventually we'd marry. Maybe get a little place outside the city. But he'd been drifting further away, and I'd been pulling him closer. And somewhere in the push and pull, we'd lost each other completely. I whispered, I'm not trying to trap you. I thought you wanted this too. He scoffed, shaking his head. I don't know what I want anymore, Hannah. But I know that right now, I feel like I'm suffocating. The mention of suffocation sparked my own anger again. Suffocating? I repeated. All I've done is try to build a life with you. It's not my fault you run the second I bring up anything serious. Ethan threw his hands in the air. Do you even hear yourself? When we first started dating, you were the adventurous one, up for spontaneous trips or midnight walks. Now everything has to be meticulously planned to fit some perfect future scenario. That cut deep. I remembered the early days, how we'd drive to the beach at 2 a.m. just to watch the waves or order takeout in the middle of a thunderstorm, dancing in the living room when the power flickered. Had I really changed that much? Had life worn me down until I became this anxious, clingy version of myself? I clenched my teeth, refusing to let his words break me completely. People grow up, Ethan. They can't stay in that college fantasy forever. We have responsibilities, careers. His laughter was short and hollow. Yes, you want a house, kids, and a white picket fence by age 30. I get it. But did you ever think about what I want? I flinched. I've always asked you. You never answer. You never really listened, he said quietly, stepping over the shards of glass and wine. I told you about my dream of starting my own business someday, travel. You just brushed it off like some silly phase. Everything I wanted, you'd measure against your timeline. Will that help us get the mortgage we need? Will that interfere with a wedding date? I felt like I was just ticking boxes on your check. My throat tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? He challenged. Have you even noticed how absent I've been? How I stopped inviting you out with my friends or telling you about my day? You never asked why, because as long as you could plan a perfect dinner or a weekend getaway to impress your Instagram followers, everything looked fine on the surface. A lump formed in my throat. I wanted to shout back, to say he was just as guilty for not communicating. But the truth is, I had seen the distance growing and chosen to ignore it. I'd tried to fix everything on the outside, planning date nights, picking out matching outfits, while completely ignoring the root cause. We were no longer two people who shared the same dreams or even the same sense of fun. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling cold. What now? I asked, my voice unsteady. Are you saying you want out? Ethan's gaze flicked to the stained floor, then back up. The expression on his face was heartbreakingly sad. I'm saying I don't see a way forward, not like this. And I can't pretend anymore. My entire body went numb. This was the moment I'd silently feared for months, but never admitted to myself. If you walk out that door, I said, my voice trembled, I'm not sure I can let you back in. He just nodded. That's what I was afraid of. For a split second, I considered begging him to stay, apologizing for all the ways I'd messed up. But something inside me rebelled. I felt like he was blaming me for everything, like I was the one who'd ruined our relationship with my big expectations. Maybe there was truth to it, but part of me believed he was just running away, refusing to face the life we could build together because he was afraid. Anger and hurt tangled inside me, making it impossible to speak. Eventually, Ethan moved past me toward the door. He paused like he wanted to say something else, but in the end, he just slipped on his shoes and left. The lock clicked shut behind him, and I sank onto the sofa, tears finally spilling over. The ring of broken glass and spilled wine glistened in the lamplight, a circle of destruction marking the spot where we'd effectively ended 3 years of our lives together. I sat there for a long time, hugging my knees. The apartment felt eerily quiet without Ethan's presence, like half the light in the room had gone out. My phone buzzed at one point and I glanced at it. Just a friend texting to say hello. I didn't reply. I wanted to vanish into the darkness, curl up and forget the night had ever happened. But the replays wouldn't stop in my head. That final look on Ethan's face burned into my memory. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I dozed off on the sofa. The next morning, I woke to the stale smell of spilled wine and the throbbing ache of heartbreak. I stumbled into the kitchen to grab a towel and started cleaning up the shattered glass. That was when I really began to cry. Big, gut-wrenching sobs that made my chest heave. I remembered all the little moments, like the time Ethan and I skipped a fancy party to eat pizza in the park, or the time we sang horribly off-key to old 90s hits on a road trip. I remembered the laughter, the inside jokes, the hope I'd felt thinking he might be my forever person. Now it all felt like a cruel joke. My best friend Kara showed up later that day, having deduced something was wrong from the cryptic text I'd managed to send. When I opened the door, she took one look at my puffy eyes and the smudged mascara on my cheeks and pulled me into a tight hug. We didn't say much at first, just stood there in silence. Then she brushed my hair aside and said, "Tell me everything," I told her, from the snide comments to the final blow. She listened intently, occasionally wincing or exhaling sharply. When I was done, she shook her head. I could sense you two were off, but I never imagined it was this bad. I shrugged, feeling hollow. I kept hoping it was just a phase. We cleaned up the rest of the mess together in silence. She found a broom to sweep up every shard, and I tossed the ruined tablecloth in the laundry hamper, not sure if the wine stain would ever come out. It felt symbolic. So many stains might never come out. When the place was as tidy as it could be, Kara put her hands on my shoulders. Hannah, maybe this is a sign that you both need to figure yourselves out before you can move forward. I nodded, but the thought of moving forward without Ethan made my stomach twist. For 3 years, he'd been the focal point of my life. Now I was alone, facing an uncertain future. Part of me wanted to be furious with him, to blame him for breaking my heart, but another part whispered that we'd both been complicit. Maybe I hadn't listened to his dreams. Maybe he hadn't tried to accommodate mine. Maybe we never really confronted our differences until they exploded all over my living. In the days that followed, I buried myself in work. I'm a freelance web designer, so fortunately, I can hide behind my laptop without seeing people face to face. I turned down social invites, ignoring my phone except for necessary client calls. My only real human contact was Kara, who checked in every evening. Each time she'd bring something comforting, a casserole, a fuzzy blanket, a new candle. She never pushed me too hard, she just let me grieve. One night, though, she showed up and found me still in pajamas. A pile of tissues by my side, laptop open to photos of Ethan and me in happier times. She took the laptop away gently and said, "You need to talk to someone about this, or you'll never heal." "I'm talking to you," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Kara sighed. "I'm biased. I love you. I'm always going to take your side. Maybe a therapist could help you see the bigger picture." I grimaced, but she had a point. I felt stuck, replaying Ethan's words on a loop, dissecting my own behavior, feeling guilty one minute and angry the next. So I gave in. I found a therapist, Dr. Rowan, and scheduled an appointment. It was awkward at first. I hated crying in front of strangers, but Dr. Rowan seemed patient and kind. Over several sessions, we dissected everything. My childhood, my relationship patterns, my habit of ignoring red flags. I admitted how, deep down, I'd been terrified of ending up alone. My parents divorced when I was a kid, and I'd sworn never to follow in their footsteps. I guess that's why I clung to the idea of marriage with Ethan, so I could prove to myself that I wasn't destined for the same heartbreak. Dr. Rowan suggested that fear might have led me to push Ethan harder than he could handle. The realization stung. It didn't excuse Ethan from responsibility, but it helped me see that this breakup wasn't just about him. It was about my own insecurities, too. With that in mind, I started taking small steps to rebuild my life without him. I reorganized my apartment, boxing up the things that reminded me too strongly of our relationship. I started running in the mornings, something I used to love before life got busy. The first few runs were brutal, physically and emotional, but after a week or two I felt a strange sense of accomplishment each time I made it back home drenched in sweat. One afternoon, about a month after Ethan left, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered, and to my shock, it was him. I froze, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. He sounded hesitant, said he just wanted to check on me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I found the courage to ask, "Check on me, why?" Ethan sighed. "Because I still care about you, Hannah. I can't just erase 3 years of my life." Tears pricked my eyes at the sound of him using my name so gently, but I fought to keep my voice steady. "If you cared so much, why did you walk away?" He didn't have a great answer for that. Just mumbled something about needing space and clarity. We danced around the idea of meeting up, but I chickened out at the last minute. I wasn't ready to see him, to face all the unresolved feelings. Part of me wondered if he was lonely, or if he'd found someone new. The thought made my chest tighten. Weeks turned into months. Summer gave way to the crisp chill of fall. I found myself going out more often with Kara, meeting new people, trying new things. I discovered a passion for watercolor painting, something that helped me process my emotions without words. Often, I'd paint in the early mornings, sipping coffee and letting soft music fill the background. It was cathartic. The memory of our disastrous dinner still haunted me, though. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night, replaying it all. The bottle spinning on the floor, Ethan's voice telling me he couldn't live like this. I'd wonder if I should have fought harder or if I should have walked away sooner. The not knowing ate at me. It still does in a way. At Dr. Rowan's suggestion, I wrote Ethan a letter not to send, but to get the words out of my system. I apologized for the ways I'd failed him, and I acknowledged the ways he failed. I ended the letter by thanking him for the good memories, for the laughter and love we'd shared. Then I tucked it into a drawer, tears streaming down my face. I thought that would be the end of it. My final goodbye. But life rarely goes as planned. One breezy Saturday, as I strolled through the local farmer's market, I looked up from a display of fresh berries and saw Ethan standing just a few stalls away. My heart, he looked thinner, a bit weary. For a second, I considered ducking behind the stall, but he caught my eye before I could hide. We both hesitated, then walked toward each other. My stomach churned as he gave me a tentative smile. "Hey," he said softly. "How are you?" I wanted to say fine, but it stuck in my throat. We ended up finding a quieter spot near some potted plants to talk. It was a mixture of awkward small talk and emotional confessions. He admitted he missed me, that he'd been at his parents' place for a while, trying to sort his life out. He'd quit his job, was thinking of starting a small travel blog, just as he'd once dreamed about. I felt a surge of pride for him, mixed with an ache of loss. This was the Ethan I'd hoped he would become, but we weren't together anymore. When he asked if I'd ever consider giving us another shot, I wavered. My mind raced with 1,000 reasons to say no. The pain we'd caused each other, the trust issues, the different visions of the future. But my heart clenched at the idea of walking away forever from someone who had once meant the world to me. I told him I needed time to think, and he nodded, looking simultaneously disappointed and relieved. Before we parted ways, he handed me a small box. "It's something I got for you a while ago," he said, "but I never found the right moment." My hand shook as I opened it later. Inside was a delicate necklace with a tiny seashell pendant. I immediately recalled the memory behind it. On one of our first trips, we'd found a seashell on the shore, and I joked that I wanted a necklace just like it. It was so personal, so thoughtful, that it reignited the sorrow I'd tried so hard to bury. I talked it all out with Kara, then with Dr. Rowan. Was I prepared to risk another heartbreak? Or was I too damaged by our fights to ever trust Ethan again? Dr. Rowan suggested that maybe it wasn't about trusting Ethan. It was about trusting myself to stand firm in what I wanted. If I could be honest about my needs without bending over backward to accommodate someone else's timeline, then maybe there was hope. For a few weeks, Ethan and I texted tentatively, sometimes meeting up for a casual coffee. The conversations were different than before. We didn't pretend everything was fine. We spoke about our fears, about the responsibilities of adult life, about the different ways people define happiness. It felt like we were finally having the talks we should have had before everything blew up. But there was a shift in me. I realized that while I might still love Ethan, I also valued the independence I'd rediscovered. I wasn't the same person who had cried on her sofa, begging life to rewind. I'd found new parts of myself, creative, resilient, stronger than I'd ever guessed. The me who sat across from Ethan at that cafe was someone who wouldn't ignore warning signs or bury her own desires for someone else's sake. One Sunday afternoon, he came over, and we sat in the very living room where our last dinner had imploded so violently. We talked for hours. We apologized for past mistakes, laughed about silly misunderstandings, and even cried a little. It felt cathartic, like lancing a wound so it could finally heal. By the time he left, I knew something profound had changed. We'd reached a point of acceptance, understanding that we cared about each other but might never be the perfect fit. When he asked if we could try again but go slower this time, I hesitated. A part of me yearned to say yes. Another part whispered that maybe we were better off apart. In the end, I told him I'd rather be his friend for now, that I wanted to see him chase his dream of travel. If he needed to roam the country, find himself, I wouldn't hold him back. Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded. It was probably the bravest thing we ever did. Choosing not to cling to each other out of habit or fear, but to let ourselves grow separately. A year later, I'm in a much better place. I've moved to a new apartment, closer to the city's art district. My freelance business is flourishing, and I've even exhibited a few of my watercolor pieces in a local gallery. The memory of that dreadful dinner still pops up sometimes, especially when I see a bottle of wine or hear a specific song that was playing that night. But I no longer feel paralyzed by it. I see it now as a turning point. Painful, yes, but necessary. Ethan and I stay in touch sporadically. He sends me photos from his travels, sometimes a text about a funny road trip mishap. He seems happy, more himself than ever. I'm genuinely glad for him, even though it still tugs at my heart to think about what could have been. But I've learned that some breakups are more than just endings. They're catalysts for growth. And when I replay that brutal dinner, as I sometimes do in quiet moments, I feel a mix of sorrow and gratitude. Sorrow for the love that died on my living room floor. Gratitude for the lessons that rose from its ashes. I don't hide from the memory anymore. It's a scar, sure, but scars can remind us of how resilient we are. Sometimes you have to watch everything fall apart in a single evening to discover how to piece yourself together again in a more honest, open, and ultimately stronger way.